The procession was to be closed by the Pope, but how was he to appear to the faithful? Was it to be according to the Roman etiquette on the sedia gestatoria, carried by a dozen henchmen, clothed in his livery of red damask, between the two flavelli of ostrich plumes dotted with peacock's feathers, under the spreading canopy of white silk embroidered with gold, the handles of which were borne by 8 referending prelates? The emperor desires that his holiness should not be carried for 3 particular reasons. The first is on account of the narrowness of the gallery through which he must pass. The second is that such a custom is unusual in France. The third is that this honor has been paid to one of the most hateful men of the Revolution, Murat, who had himself thus carried to Notre Dame. These considerations are submitted to the judgment of his holiness, who will consider them in his wisdom, and who will be equally venerated by the French people under the canopy and with the procession which will accompany him. The assertion about Murat was misleading. Murat, after his acquittal, had been carried in triumph from the Palais de Justice to the convention, but what connection had he with Notre Dame? Mademoiselle Maillard, who had impersonated reason there, was a better instance, and it is doubtless from the confusion of the two cases that this strange misstatement took its source. Napoleon was actuated by another reason, which he did not mention. It was that, as he was not to be carried to the cathedral himself, he did not wish anyone else to be so, that the entry of the Pope into Notre Dame amidst the splendors of the Roman pomp might detract from his own entrance. There is something of the mummer about every man who looms large in the public eye. At any rate, the Pope did not insist. He was to go on foot, and after certain preliminary prayers would mount his throne, where he would say tierces while awaiting their majesties. The emperor would set out from the Tuileries, go to the archbishop's palace, there put on the imperial dress and ornaments, and walk in procession from the palace to the door of the cathedral. This procession could be looked upon as a reminiscence of the consecration at Reims, but neither the service book nor the ceremonial allowed the sovereign-elect to present himself at the cathedral clothed in the dress and insignia which the consecration ought rightly to bestow on him. According to the royal ceremonial, he should have presented himself in a tunic. According to the service book, in armor. Napoleon then considered himself neither as summoned nor elected, but as invested. What then was the purpose of the consecration? Grave as this check was, the Pope did not protest. On entering the church, the emperor and empress would be received by the cardinals, Cambacérès, and Billoy. But these 2 cardinals were to felicitate the sovereigns, to present them with the holy water, and to lead them in procession under the canopy borne by the canons to the places which they were to occupy in the choir. They were to perform none of the rites required by the service book, none of those laid down in the ceremonial. They would not lead up to the sovereign-elect and present him to the consecrated, nor reply to his questions, nor was the consecrator to give an exhortation on the duties of the sovereign towards the church. All this was abolished and replaced by the singing of Veni Creator. The emperor has desired that these 4 articles, presentation, question, answer, and exhortation, be suppressed, as never having been customary in France and suitable to the present circumstances. The emperor knew very little about the custom followed in France for the ceremony of presentation, in which the bishops at Lyon and Beauvais took part, was obligatory and a good deal more elaborate than in the service book. The exhortation used actually to be replaced by a prayer to which the king listened on his knees before the altar. The emperor would kneel to pray, but it would be at a praying desk with the throne behind him and a canopy above his head. During this prayer, which would be besides a short duration and but intermittent fervor, he would give the hand of justice, the scepter, the crown, the collar, the mantle, and the sword of the grand officers, who would lay them with the ring upon the altar. The crown and mantle, the empress too, would be taken off and carried with the ring to the altar. Then there was the oath in the negotiation between Fesch and Consalvi, 2 demands having clearly made on the part of the Pope and granted by the Emperor certain reservations on the subject of the constitutional oath, at the taking of which the Pope refused to assist, and the obligation on the part of the Emperor to take the religious oath is laid down in the service book. The oath was thus stated: I promise to swear before God and his angels to enact and preserve law, justice, and peace to the Church of God and to the people under me, to show religious and proper proper respect to the priests of the churches of God, to maintain inviolate the privileges which have been conferred and bestowed upon the churches by the emperors and kings, to pay a fitting respect to the abbeys, counts, and vassals. The emperor did not accept the latter part. All that refers to the promise of maintaining the churches as under the feudal system and in the possession of property, which they no longer shall be omitted. In addition, the emperor refused to repeat the oath. He would only ratify and agree to it by the word prefecture. Instead of kissing, as he should, the hand of the consecrator, he would touch with both hands the gospel presented to him by the Grand Almoner. Even this was a great concession and was paraded as such. It is considered that a great deal has been concluded by the obtaining of His Majesty's agreement to an oath other than that prescribed by the constitutions of the empire. Of what value, then, were the engagements entered into by fashion, which were regarded so lately as set aside in each article? Here again, the Pope raised no objection. After the oath, the prayer pronounced by the Pope would be taken from the service book, but the essential words in it would be altered. The service book contained "Eligimus, whom we have chosen or elected," for this was substituted in "Imperatorum consecraturi sumus, whom we are about to consecrate emperor." Here, moreover, Josephine appeared for the first time. The service book, not having provided for a double consecration of a sovereign and his consort, an innovation was made every time, or almost every time, when the name of the emperor occurred. There was added a consortum eius and his consort. This consort was anonymous, but they knew at Paris that she was named Josephine, not Victoire. After the prayer came the litanies. According to the service book, the king prostrated himself while the Pope and the cardinals knelt to recite them. The emperor and empress would remain seated. They would kneel only to receive the blessings, but this blessing, which is twofold in the service book, benedicere et consecrare, the emperor wished to be threefold, as was given at Rheims. Benedicere, sublimare, et consecrare. He insisted on sublimare. This word has been used in France since the beginning of the monarchy. He also insisted on a motet during the blessings, which was taken from the French ceremonial, and which he said was suitable to the ceremony. It was actually as follows. The high priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anointed Solomon king in Zion, and approaching him joyfully said, "May the king live forever." Only as regards the unctions was he modest. In the French ceremonial, 9 unctions were made on the emperor or king. Rather, this number was too large and inconvenient. The service book admits only of 2, one on the right hand, the other on the neck. The last is unsuitable. Unction on the head is to be substituted for it. That is to say, on the forehead and on the 2 hands, the prayers are taken from the service book, having thus decreed on what place the unction should be made, simply because one of the customary places had been inconvenient and the other unsuitable, and having determined that they should be, as in the case of bishops, in capiti in manibus, on the head and hands. Napoleon could have regulated also the liquid of which the unctions should be made. Thus, he might have claimed certain privileges which were said to be inseparable from the crown of France. The unction which other kings received was made with the oil of the catechumens. That which the bishops received was a chrism. Pope Innocent III had said, "So that it may be shown how great is the difference between the authority of the pontiff and the power of the prince." But according to the French writers, only the kings of France are anointed with the episcopal chrism. At the consecration of the king, the Archbishop of Reims placed the gold paten of the chalice of Saint-Remy upon the middle of the altar. The Grand Prior of Saint-Remy, having opened the holy ampulla, presented it to the archbishop, who drew from it with a golden needle the amount of a grain of wheat of the oil shut up therein. This he put on the paten, and took with the same needle from the chrism as much as was necessary to consecrate a bishop, and mingle it with oil. As to the holy ampulla, there could be no question, and even General Beauharnais, the father of her who was to be consecrated empress, that is not true, had not been indifferent to it. He who had taken the initiative in asking the convention that the holy ampulla might be brought to Paris, so that the oil within it might be there solemnly burnt on the altar of the fatherland. But there was no lack of the chrism. Although the official reports do not mention it, it was the episcopal unction of the chrism which was given to the emperor and empress.